One of the most powerful voting blocs in America is black voters. There are more than 34 million black Americans eligible to vote in this election. That's 14% of all eligible voters. Historically, they voted Democrat, but this election is seeing a slight shift. And in a race that is this close, could they be the difference? Here to help answer that is Michael Fauntleroy. He's the Associate Professor and Policy and Government, Director of Race, Politics and Policy Center at George Mason University, a regular for CTV, and great to have you here in person with us.
Finally,
welcome. Yes, finally. Listen, there have been reports of the Democrats slipping among black male voters. That's sort of been the focus in the last couple of weeks. What is the appeal of a Trump administration to this demographic?
Right. So I do think that there is some evidence of some shifting. I do also think that talk has been a little overstated by some of the earlier polls. As we've come closer to today, the numbers have begun to line up with historical norms. But to the extent that there has been a shift, it is largely about personality.
Trump's personality?
Trump's personality can be attractive to some men, for example, who like the bravado that you get with him. And, you know, there are a lot of voters that don't tune into politics on a regular basis. So for those voters, you know, they may be more driven by personality than policy. And I think that's also some of what we see with these voters.
We talked about black male voters. I want to talk about black women voters. 90% of black women voted for Joe Biden in 2020. 94% voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016. What is the power of this voting demographic, and how does it affect the outcome of an election like this?
Well, if you think those are big numbers, you wait until tonight. I expect that number to be over 96%.
Really?
Yeah, I just think that the energy, particularly among women generally, but particularly among black women, has just been phenomenal. And so I think that they are going to be a major player in the fundraising aspect for their support of Vice President Harris. Has just sort of overwhelmed a lot of people around the country, and I think it's going to help carry across the
Well, I remember in her speech where she thanked black women specifically for part of her win. Listen, Barack Obama was speaking to black men at an event in Pennsylvania, and he had this to say, and then I want to get your take on this quote.
You just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. And you're coming up with other alternatives and other reasons for that.
Can you unpack that for us? What is he saying here?
Well, first, that was a bad look among black men who pay attention to this kind of stuff all the time. President Obama has had a tendency at times to say things that seem like lecturing black men, and there's a universe of black men who really weren't excited about it. Now, having said that, he had some points that I think were fair, that sometimes voters, and in this case he's talking about black male voters, but sometimes voters get caught up in things that don't really have much to do about the policy process or don't really have much to do about what's important. And he's trying to get people to understand that and get behind Kamala Harris.
And what was he trying to say about the fact that they weren't voting for her? Is it because she's a woman?
I think that's the largest part of it. I mean, there may be a number of other things. She, earlier in her career, was a former prosecutor, and some people felt like she was unduly harsh in her prosecution of black men. That's a little overstated in my view, but I think that has something to do with it too.
Let's take a look at swing states. We were just doing an explainer of electoral college votes for our Canadian viewers. Which of these swing states, which of those 7, have the largest block of black voters, and which party are they voting for?
So I would look at Georgia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania tonight. Georgia closes at 7, North Carolina closes at 7:30, Pennsylvania closes at 8. All 3 of those states have fairly large concentrations of black voters in major metropolitan areas. If it turns out that those voters show up and support Vice President Harris, and she wins 2 of those 3 states or all 3 of those states, then it's going to be an early night for Democrats because she's going to win.
How does age play into this race?
You know, this is a really interesting sort of sidebar because you have a universe of voters in the ages of 18 to 29 who in some cases are doing this for the first time and have a lot less patience for the policy process than older voters do. And so they don't quite understand why things aren't going the way they should. And I get this all the time in my classrooms. They just don't understand why it takes so long to get something done. And why is it that our elected leaders are so old? That seems to be the 2 things that they're most focused on.
Well, she is the younger of the 2 candidates, if age is a concern for them. Really quickly, Mike, I want to ask you, you said you've been raised in this city.
Yes.
What is the feeling? What are you noticing that's different about this election, and what are you expecting tonight and in the days to come?
It's a very pensive and tense time in the city, unlike anything I've ever seen. In 2008, for example, when Barack Obama was on the verge of winning, it was a much more celebratory mood. You know, you fast forward to 2016, there was a lot of energy around Hillary Clinton and thinking that she was going to win. Of course, that didn't happen. But we're at a very dark time right now, and I think that there are a lot of people that are concerned about what might happen in the days and weeks ahead. You drive through the downtown of this city now, and in many ways it's a ghost town with boarded up buildings and fencing all over the place. That is not the Washington, D.C. that I grew up in. It worries me greatly, and I think the next few days and couple weeks, depending on the outcome of the election, is going to have a lot to say about this city going forward.
Professor Fauntleroy, always great to hear from you. Great conversation today. We will be watching along with you. Thanks so much for coming.
My pleasure. Thank you.
If you liked that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.